everybody. Adam from Tested here, trying to wave and talk at the same time. Wave, talk. Okay. Obviously, I'm a puppet, not Adam for real, but I'm a puppet for a reason, because we have a very special guest here on Tested today. All right, here we go. That's as much puppeteering as I'm allowed to do, because I'm not a puppeteer. But we do have an amazing guest. All right, you stay right there. Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Barnaby Dixon. Come on in here, sir.
Hello,
Barnaby.
nice to meet you.
I'm such a fan of your work. We are all fans of your work here at Tested, and we have been for a long time.
Thank you.
So tickled pink that not only are you here in the cave, but you've also brought some of your incredible creations. Now, can you tell me everything about this? Because I've never seen puppeteering of the kind that you do, and I'm curious about your whole journey with it.
Well, I started off as a stop-motion animator, and I was keen to do stuff on YouTube, but found the process to be a little too time-consuming to get regular content out there.
Okay.
So I thought I'd try and adapt what I do in terms of the scale and the kind of knowledge that I have of movement and physics and things like that, and apply it to real-time puppetry. But I hadn't seen a type of puppetry that could kind of rival stop motion in terms of its fluidity. Mm-hmm. So I set out to try and create puppets that get as close as possible.
Well, it's funny because within the history of puppeteering, I mean, I feel like some of this starts with Charlie Chaplin and his dinner rolls, right? Like he gets such an incredible personality out of that. But then I also remember that for Alien 3, David Fincher, for some of the Alien puppets, was using live puppeted rod puppets for that, and the effect was incredible.
It's incredible, yeah.
And I feel like that has a direct lineage to the kind of stuff that you're doing, because my brain really can't conceive when I'm watching your puppets move that there's someone behind it. It just feels like an entirely new organism.
Well, thank you.
So what was the progression? How did you realize that your hands could do so much?
Well, I started off with a puppet. This is Dabchick here, and the first iteration of that was actually something of a hybrid between stop motion and live action. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of using my hand as kind of like a rigging device almost, and the legs I would move incrementally, and it would be something like time lapse as well.
Okay.
So I would sort of move one leg up like that. But all the elements that I couldn't move in real time were done in kind of a stop motion fashion. Okay. So for example, the head and the wings, I would go in between the frames and move it. But it was very, very tricky in that you had to keep your hands super, super still for a very long time. So I devised this.
After a while.
Yeah, so I devised this foot pedal and all sorts of weird kind of things to try and get it working.
You're obsessed.
Yeah, I was, certainly. I still am, for sure. But it was, because again, it took a little longer than I'd have liked it to. So I thought, could all these elements be created in real time in terms of the movement? So gradually this puppet became slightly more live actionable, and I came up with a head mechanism and wing mechanisms and things like that.
Now I'm noticing some familiar parts here.
Yep.
These look very much like animation armature ball and socket joints.
That's right. There's a few kind of very typically stop motion disciplines at play. In fact, these joints here I get from John Wright Model Making over in Bristol, and they of course do the work for Aardman.
I was going to I recognize the work. We visited Aardman last year.
Oh yes, yeah. Right. So there's some silver soldering as well, which is very useful for kind of this scale of miniature engineering.
And yet, you're not sculpting and casting these. These are all hand sculpted out of thermoplastic.
That's right. Yeah, they are. And for a lot of good reasons. I started off with resin. It's super, super heavy, very, very clunky, and also it has no flex to it whatsoever. So all of these elements that, say, have to go around my hand, there was no flex to it. It's very uncomfortable. They would
crack or shatter.
Yes, yeah. Or they'd have to be very big to prevent them bending and cracking.
Right.
It was very strong, but again, very heavy. So I started using this material. I think the first one was the bug puppet. I remade Dabchick in this material as well. This is Dabchick. And the result is it's night and day, really. It's just so much easier, so much more comfortable.
And I mean, there's also an immediacy to it that I really appreciate as a person who is able to be meticulous, but also quite impatient.
Right.
I mean, you're an animator. Clearly,
sure.
You have the same proclivities. The immediacy of this plastic, which I was about 17 or 18 when it first came online, and I remember making vampire teeth with it, and all sorts of different costume parts. But you've taken it to this whole new level. Could you put together the bug puppet, and can we watch it?
For sure.
Watch it come to life?
So these two fingers go up like that. and then the index in there, the pinky finger in there.
Those are arms.
These are arms, yeah, and they're rigged so that I can push with my
what?
thumb.
Okay, wait a second. I'm freaking out here. That's... Oh my gosh, you've got little tiny...
Yeah, so these are tiny cable mechs that I made.
And you made them from scratch. That is a spring inside a flexible plastic rubber housing.
That's right. Yep. So I can get just one finger if I want to, and also open up, and also it gives it the the possibility of holding things also.
Oh my God!
It's fun, huh? So the next bit is the head. So we'll put that on, and there's a few kind of mechanisms at play here. I can get a little side to side there, but also I can get my thumb in there when it's not operating the hands and just get that little bit of extra up and down, which is great for sort of like subtle direction of gaze.
So I've done, my father was an animator.
Oh, right.
I've done a little stop motion animation in my time, enough to know that I'm not good at it and not part of the gene pool that can do it regularly. But it does require, I mean, stop motion animation requires being able to think about the movements of multiple things at once.
That's right,
and hold all that in your head. Do you find that this requires the same parts of your brain except on a real-time basis?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of what I've done with stop motion animation in terms of the knowledge that I've gathered has really kind of carried over fairly directly. It takes practice, obviously. A stop motion animator can't just put this on and do it. I wouldn't, well, I wasn't able to, for sure. It took a little while. But the knowledge plays into it in a really huge way.
It's amazing. Just as you're putting these things on, I'm starting to see a personification
There we
happen.
go, yeah.
And now, how do you practice with this? Do you put a camera and watch the screen like a puppeteer would?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the practice goes hand in hand, quite literally, with the building of it. So I'm trying things out in terms of, does this fit? Does it move well? All this kind of thing. So by the time the puppet's actually finished, I'm close. Maybe I've got like 80% of the movement there to an acceptable degree. So
because you're actually plotting the movement while doing the mechanical
That's
design.
right, yeah. So I'll change things if it doesn't work. If something feels like it's straining or feels uncomfortable to a degree that I'm not happy with, I'll change it. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
There you go, there's the head looking down and up.
That is, I mean, I just, from right here, it's 100% cell, right? Like, hello. Since you've done this, have you become aware of other people or older puppetry styles that have a lot in common with this?
Not too much. We had to sort of look into protecting the ideas, and that required a fair bit of research to see what was out there. And nothing was similar enough to be a problem. I've seen, doing research, I did see someone that was using sort of these two fingers like this, and then they had, I think, strings operating the arms. It's a cool idea, but it's not similar enough to be an issue, I don't think.
Yeah. I know that Jim Henson started an annual puppetry convention because he wanted people to realize that puppets were more than just Muppets.
Right.
That there's this incredible, rich tapestry. It's astounding to me you have kind of invented a whole new form out of whole cloth, and it's just so beautiful.
Thank you.
Do you watch like old Fred Astaire movies to get moves?
No, although, well, having said that, I have seen a lot of those movies, and I think, I mean, I do a lot of dance videos with this puppet, and something that works really well with this puppet in particular is because it has two hands. So there's a lot of kind of body isolation going on with even Fred Astaire stuff. So the bottom half of him could be moving very quickly, and the top half looks almost like it's floating.
So something that would come naturally to you, which is the bifurcation of your hands, ends up looking like highly advanced
There
dance
we go,
moves.
yeah. So it's a way of cheating, essentially.
Sure.
but it's a slightly different skill set. So you can get the top half staying fairly still while there. I mean, you've got to get that moving as well.
Oh my God. Now, are you always like sort of practicing moves with your hands, like sitting on a plane or just waiting for the bus?
Not so much, but often when I do demonstrations, I'll discover something new. I don't put the puppets on too often, to be honest. I think, obviously, if I'm vlogging or doing demos, and I, just to impress someone, I might try something new, and then I'll think, oh, I've got to sort of apply that to the repertoire of movements that I can do.
I like this, the secondary movement of the antenna. That's a very Muppet, feathers on Big Bird's head.
It does a lot, yeah. You can get away with it with things that don't look like they would have muscles inside. And, and the antenna is a good example of that.
Oh,
so you can really get them moving around.
Oh, it is so lovely. I'm just, I can't believe, whoa! Now you also use blacklight.
That's right.
To your advantage to kind of make yourself disappear
Sure.
and bring the puppets more to the forefront.
Yeah, it's a really fun thing to do, especially again in a sort of a dance video setting. It really makes the puppets pop out and me kind of recede in a way that makes me even. Well, I think there's two things at play. There's suspension of disbelief, and then if you can aid that through lighting and things like that, that can also help. But either is good. But the effect of black light, I think, works really well.
Have you tried wearing like black surgical gloves?
I did, yeah. I got very sweaty in there.
Yeah,
in the movement. And also they fit to such a degree that if you put gloves on...
You'd have to make a puppet custom for gloves.
Kind of, yeah. Or often what I'll do is I'll cut the fingers out so that I can actually have the fingers kind of poking through that, and that makes it less sweaty and a better fit.
Well, so the idea of using black light and bright light at the front where the operator recedes into the distance has a long lineage in the history of magic. It's called the dark arts.
Right,
And it goes back well over 100 years.
Right.
Where magicians would, on stage, seem to make things just magically appear and disappear.
Okay.
And they're using sharp, thin lines of light and black velvet cloths and other methods for doing that.
Yeah.
I'm almost speechless.
You can really get a sense of the weight as well when you feel them there. So because it's not a string puppet, obviously, so it doesn't have its own weight. You apply the weight itself, and you can push down to any degree that feels reasonable for the weight of what you think this animal would weigh.
How many puppets have you made over the years?
I started actually, I guess, in 2015 making puppets that were actually live action puppets as opposed to ones that were hybrids.
Yeah.
So I've made a couple versions of Dabchick, so that's including this one, so that would be 3. I made a sort of tribal character, and that was actually the first one to go viral.
Can we see another? Can we see the tribal one?
Oh, this I don't have the tribal one. This is in fact this is an aardvark one.
Oh,
and
this is a totally different one.
Although yeah, it does have these kind of tribal markings too.
Yeah.
But again, this one can glow in UV light.
Now, are you? Is the plastic UV reflective, or are you adding glazes of paint?
Well, how it works is that there's this. Maybe you've come across it. It's very sort of high power glowing powder. So in that you can hit it with a UV light and it will be glowing for a long time afterwards.
Yeah.
And because the thermoplastic is somewhat translucent, you can mix it in, and if you keep mixing it in, it really and then it's like a layer of paint that can't chip because it's the material itself.
I love how you've sprung these things to center in a way that gives you, again, this is almost like a little bit of a secondary movement.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And there's one on the heel, rather on the toe.
Right.
That will, so when he steps forward, it's those things add a lot really, because although you aren't kind of controlling it directly, the way that you interact with the surface really makes it a believable appendage.
Yeah, I mean that right there, when I see that, that totally communicates. So do you spend a lot of time at the hardware store playing around with different rubber tubing and figuring out the right durometer
It's mainly kind of eBay really, and buying 40 of the wrong thing and then finding the right thing eventually.
That's what's all up in that cloth.
Right?
It's 40 of the wrong thing, boxes and boxes of it.
Yeah, so yeah, the right type of silicone, the right gauge. Ankles as well have to be quite strong. It's the same with stop motion.
Yeah.
That's if the puppet's going to wilt, that's the place where it'll go.
R2-D2's weakest part are his ankles.
Really?
They're always mine too.
R2-D2
My weakest part are my ankles.
Probably mine too.
You're not old enough to have weak ankles yet.
I'll get there.
And this is you have all of this secondary movement in these little spines.
So that was super important to me to get some kind of fur happening.
Yeah.
Because again, the secondary movement, and also I hadn't made a puppet kind of furry before. I've added these, like I say, the antenna.
Yeah.
But and the way they quiver too, and it just adds a lot to the thing. And also it distracts somewhat from the fact that there's a wrist sticking out the back of it. All this kind of movement just really aids in that suspension of disbelief.
I have some friends who are Muppeteers, and it really is a truism that the moment they put the puppet on their hand, you stop noticing the puppeteer almost immediately. As soon as the puppeteer puts enough personality into the puppet, they just disappear.
It's a fascinating thing. It's I think suspension of disbelief is a lot more accessible than people realize, and people can do it fairly innately, I think.
My friend Dave Goles, who performs Gonzo and Bunsen Honeydew, said he once did an appearance for a bunch of kids with Gonzo. And at the end of the appearance, they said, okay, kids, thank Gonzo. And they all thank Gonzo. And they said, and thank Dave. And the kids were like, who's Dave? They totally ignored it.
That's funny. Yeah, so nearly done. Just got one more. And again, we have these springs there, that kind of the ankle movement.
Look at this. This is a totally different, ah! Oh my gosh.
So this is the hardest motion. I demonstrated this in the video, and I tried to get people doing this at home, where you move the ring finger at the same time as the thumb, and then the index finger at the same time as the pinky, and this is the movement you get. I'm still not completely versed in it, but I can go about that sort of speed fairly well enough. And the hand is very asymmetrical. Of course, you have the thumb sticking out at a completely different angle to the little finger. So you have to try and hold your hand in a way that minimizes that difference.
And you've also sculpted it to accommodate for that.
Again, yes.
To try and offset that.
So there's a few movements we can do, like you can do this here.
Oh, he's very good at balancing.
Yeah.
I love that you've used just like are those little screws? Little
they
bolts?
are, yeah.
I mean, there's an accessibility to the construction that I also find really charming. How much personality do you put in, and how much comes out as it's going? I mean, you kind of meet these characters as you're sculpting.
Right. It's a bit of the same, but rather kind of both things at once. So you see what your hand can do, and if it looks kind of realistic to whatever animal this I'm not even sure what animal this is, but if it looks realistic, I think it's something you focus in on, and it's like, oh, I'll do that again. There's a nice thing that I do, I think, that people picked up on, where you have him sort of sit down and just hang his feet off like that, and you get that. If you get the swing just right, it adds so much. It's quite tricky.
It's a very Wallace and Gromit kind of swing that you're nailing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh. And it's a totally different construction of the claws that you've done here.
Yeah, that's right. So it's that glowing material, but I reinforced the tips, I think, with a little bit of steel, just because I found they wore down very easily. Because again, it's the friction can melt it just as heat can. But
also, I mean, the solution to the problem of how to make the feet look realistic, your solution's not standard. I mean, you're adding these secondary claws that come down that kind of hide the tip of your finger, but they also make the whole foot look like it's moving to adjust to the terrain.
It was just trial and error, really. And if you get something that looks right in terms of the build, it's just the same as the movement. If it looks right, you focus in, you try it, and again, it sort of carries over to the sort of eBay thing. You do it 40 times wrong, and then eventually you'll get it right, but you only need to do it right once.
Do you have whole sets of feet that are the wrong kind?
I usually melt them down, actually.
Oh, yeah, of course, of course.
Well, that's the wondrous thing about this material. If you get it wrong, you can just take heat to it. I mean, if you do it too many times, you can soot it up a little bit, and it gets a bit kind of black. You know. Yeah, with your fingers. But sometimes that's an aesthetic that's quite fun.
He's beautiful.
Thanks. You can kind of.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to put on the third one.
Sure.
Just so we can get the full scope.
Alrighty.
Now this one has a separate harness.
Yes, yeah. So this is well, I'll put it on and I'll explain as I go. Before I put it on, I can show you this motion here. So this is just the tail motion. This is a later edition, in fact. This didn't appear in the earlier versions. So you're just playing with the flexibility of the plastic there.
Right.
And you're able to get...
that movement is adding a secondary movement to the tail.
That's right, and it works in the way that you can lean the bird forward and it stretches out as if it's counterbalancing. You see what I'm saying? So that adds a lot. And that's something I could only do with this material because of the flex of it. I'm sure other plastics you could.
Sure.
But it's something I couldn't have done with the resin.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, there are resins that would achieve that, but you'd be doing a lot of trial and error.
Sure.
Oh, and that just clips together.
That does, yeah. Again, because of the flex. So you can squeeze it together just a little bit and then hooks in like that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
So
You're getting ready.
Yeah. It's over like that. You see these little marks that it leaves in my hand from the other thing.
Oh, wow.
So that's the aardvark one. Yeah. Like I said, I was vlogging this morning with this one, and my wrist was a very funny color at the end. Alrighty, so let's get that in. And this just clips in there, like that. So then it's secure. And that's really helpful if your hand kind of cramps up, because you can just go like that and just stretch out. You see what I mean?
Yeah,
and that's really useful, because you've got to think that these things, especially if you're vlogging, are going to be on your hand for quite a long time. I think it was on my hand for about, 6 hours this morning, perhaps? Something like that. So here we go.
Oh, my goodness. Oh. And so you've got this extra movement of the wings you're activating with your thumb.
Right, and the mouth too.
Oh, you could do both.
I can do both, yeah. Just about. It's a little tricky to flap and open the mouth. Oh, well, there we go.
Look at that. Oh my goodness. Wow. Yeah, there's nothing but dust down there. That is so incredible. You must be a real hit with children. They must
Yeah, they
kind of
like
go
it.
nuts. Wow. Are you thinking about getting larger, using both hands to make? Because it seems to me you're activating mostly with the fingers, but that you could increase the scale.
The tricky thing about doing that is the fact that your fingers are only a certain length,
Right.
and the knuckles, which are so crucial to getting the movement in the right place, would have to be further up, you know what I mean? So
It's true, but Rick Baker, among others, has designed linkages that add extra bending digits to your finger.
Yes, that could be awesome.
So maybe through our various connections, we could get you one of these mechanics, and you can see that,
That could be fun.
you could get another 1.5 or 2
Okay.
inches, because he does that for some of his ape costumes.
Yeah.
To get longer fingers. To
Right.
work. Oh, it's just, and so you've been doing this now for 3 years.
Yes.
That's the most exciting thing I've heard, because if you've only been doing this for 3 years and you've gotten this far, I cannot wait to see what's next. Do you have some other characters that are starting to gestate in your head?
Yeah. I'm building some more ones. I do like the two-handed operation one, so I think I'll do a few more of that. But also, you know, when you have the puppets, it's nice to use them to their full extent. I mean, there's some puppets that I'd really like to use more. I have a dinosaur puppet that I'd like to get back in the game somehow.
Yeah.
But again, once you have the puppets, they're kind of a tool for making kind of vlogs, music videos, things like that, and that's just as interesting to me as actually the construction.
Sure.
Perhaps more interesting, actually.
Listen, you're welcome to come back anytime. If you ever need to use this
Thank
shop
you.
to make
That'd be
anything
cool.
specific, you're welcome to come here and
Thank you.
build here. I really can't gush enough about how beautiful these are. And both their design, their execution, your puppeteering, and what you're doing with your puppeteering.
Sure, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, amazing.
So again, you can feel the kind of weight on your hand if you...
Yeah. You're giving him a real bit of gravity. Wow, look at that. Yeah, hello. I am gobsmacked.
Thanks.